So we're all here to discuss the diversity in the workplace. I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves, if that's okay.
Okay. Sure. My name is Julie Silk. I work for Keysight Technologies. We're the test and measurement part of Agilent, which got split off from Hewlett Packard. So we're an old company with a new name. And what I do there is I'm a program manager. I've been managing our program to compliance with the EU ROS directive, and so we just hit our deadline, so I got a little calmer at work. And also I lead our material reliability programs.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Gayle Patterson, and from the accent you'll gather that I've travelled a little bit further. So I'm from Bonnie, Scotland, which is about 6 hours time zone difference. So please be gentle because I'm a little bit tired, as is Claire. I am the founder of a company called FLITE, which is Female Leaders in Tech Europe. But it's not, and it shouldn't be restricted to Europe only. And I'll come to that a little bit later. But I'm here to learn and network with you so that I can communicate with my members the types of challenges that we're having. Because in Europe, with female or women in tech groups, we're just a little bit behind the game. And we're playing a little bit of catch up. So I'm looking forward to a really interactive session so that I can try to absorb as much as possible to take away for the FLITE members.
I'm Ed Kawizinski. I'm an IBM fellow, and I focus on our Watson IoT implementation, specifically the work that we're doing in the insurance space. And I don't really drink a lot, but when I like to drink, I love scotch.
Yeah.
My name is Jill Marfan. I've spent about 10 years in SMT, so that's how I kind of became associated with the SMTAi when I was at Intel. And actually in February I moved over to Nike. So I'm doing basically footwear manufacturing. So it was a great transition for me, going from years of doing manufacturing of new cutting edge Intel devices, things like the Google glasses or your Apple Watch or things like that, figuring out how to develop those and translate them into high volume. And now I'm doing that with shoes. So I thought everyone kept telling me when I got to Nike it was so much simpler. It's just a shoe. Don't worry about all these complicated little tiny devices that you do with SMT. But we have some challenges with flexible products. So looking at these outsoles that vary, all kinds of dimensions. Sizing, we're doing something from a size 3 to size 13, so size runs and tooling and stuff. So I'm right now in the middle of kind of learning about all the different challenges of manufacturing in a totally new industry. So.
And I should probably introduce myself, as I didn't do that at the beginning. I'm Claire Saunders, and we organise a trade show in the UK and work around the world, but our main platform is a industry hub online called What's New in Electronics. It posts news, updates, careers opportunities, training. It's a free of charge service. Started just over a year ago. It's going very, very well. But myself, been involved with the electronics industry now for 24 years. So I know quite a few people in the room, but for those of you who don't know me. What we'd like to do this now is to obviously ask people their questions, ask you your experiences, and to see what you find as challenging in the workplace being a woman. And obviously for the men, the opportunities that you see. Any questions? I have some already. We had a feeling this might start like this. So we actually posted out to our FLITE members some questions asking them what they'd like to ask the panel. So the first one is from Fihi, HR Director of Jabil. What is your secret to being as successful as a woman in leadership? Any comments, anybody?
Well, for starters, is to kind of pay it forward, be the one with answers, volunteer to help out with projects or whatever, you know, offer information and reviews so that you're seen as one to go to for things, and that, you know, you're seen as a contributor. So, and then I think always don't be shy, don't be against the wall, sit at the table, you know, speak up, you know, don't shy away, so that it's clear that, again, that you're a contributor and that you're helpful. And, you know, when leadership is needed, sometimes you step in, even if it's not necessarily your role. And that also can help, leading meetings and leading projects and volunteering for those things.
So I think it's an interesting question, because I would break it into a couple of component parts, and you can see that my background is actually operations. But I would look at it as, I don't really look at myself as being female, and I don't look at myself as being successful. I just try to work as hard as I possibly can. If people in the room see me as female and see me as successful, then maybe we just view things in a different way. To me, it's across any industry, the person that I want to do the job is the person that's the best skilled to do that job. And gender diversity or age or any other classification shouldn't really come into it. If I do look at females whom I admire as a successful female, then I think they have the characteristics that you have spoken about. I think the cliche of asking a busy person to do something, you'll get the job done, is very classical female, who's juggling a multiple of life balance and home life and work, to come to the next day, to come to work the next day and operate effectively. So I think it is that way of being very self-sacrificing, offering your time, mentoring. And when I look at the FLITE platform and I look at females who are coming up the learning curve, those that are more driven, those that are more hungry, those that are more ambitious, but also the females who are not afraid to put their hand up and say, I don't understand, can you stop, can we take it back a step, can you explain? So just those people who are a little bit more outspoken, I tend to see rise up the ranks.
You know, there's two ways I want to be able to answer this question. Obviously, I can't answer it from a female perspective. However, I feel that as an individual who has worked with women in technology, to give a perspective of what I looked for or how I would interpret a particular situation. And I would agree, I want the best person capable of doing the job, being a part of the team. I also recognize that sometimes you have to give people an opportunity to do that. So part of that is when the opportunity's there, people will open the door. Don't be afraid to walk through it. You may need somebody to help you get to the door, but you're the one that has to walk through it. We have a chairman at IBM, and she's a woman. And I will tell you that I have worked firsthand with her predecessor and her, and I think one of the things that makes her successful is the way that she handles situations. Others have come in with an iron fist to mandate an outcome. Then there's another way, which is bringing the best out of people to get a better outcome. And I feel that was a very unique characteristic to our current chairman. It can be intimidating to walk into a meeting to present to the chairman of a $100 billion company, and to know when you walked in the door to present and to talk to her and the cabinet, that she gave you this kind of calming look that says, you're going to be fine, and by doing so allowed me to actually get the best out of myself. And I think that's such an important characteristic. Use the assets that you have to your advantage to make you different and better.
I think you guys hit on it. I think the two things that I thought of when you asked that question, first are kind of like how do you define success? Because I think that's probably the most important thing going in, who's successful. It's going to vary by who you are and what you're trying to do. And I think sometimes we're always trying to measure up our own success to those around us. And I think a lot of times you kind of have to step back and say, like, what is going to make me successful at the end of the day? And that's going to be different between people. So I think that, and then being very confident in who you are and what you bring to the table and what differentiates you. And then I think being humble at the same time. So I think you guys hit on it. Those are the same things I was thinking. So
It's quite interesting because we had a similar question when we held a panel like this over in the UK with regards to flights. And a few women had issues where they said that they felt that they were their own worst enemies because they went into a meeting and immediately started to take the notes. And, that's not just because you're the only lady sitting around the table. It's not your job to take the notes. So they kind of made their own footprint straight away. So it's important, that you stand there and you stand proud and put your message out, let people know who you are.
definitely.
Anybody got any comments on this? Sherry?
I agree that you have to define what success is, because you can be successful, you can be a successful engineer, you can be a successful janitor in this industry. You can be, but it depends on what you feel like success is and how people view you. And I kind of lost track of what the original question was, but how people view you is how you allow them to view you. And not sitting down and assuming that you're going to be the one taking the notes for the meeting. Although a lot of us have maternal instincts and it's our natural reaction to take care of things. So if you see something that's not being taken care of, you just jump in and do it. And then unfortunately people expect that to happen. So you have to kind of set yourself apart and say, okay, no, we're at the same level. Why don't you take notes instead?
That's right. Thank you. I won't do that to you again.
She won't promise.
Warm me up for tomorrow.
Would anybody else like to ask a question to the panel, or should I take another one from my list?
If I can just add to that, Claire. So something else that I've seen in my past life before FLITE, I used to be the head of marketing and communications for a company called Flextronics, which I'm sure you're aware of in Europe. And something that we set up an established female group in Flextronics. There was a core unit in the organisation. And that was mainly driven by the fact that in a company that size, 4 presidents, 2 of those presidents were female. So it was quite a unique organisation, and females certainly were empowered. When I came out of that environment, that's when I noticed that was not reality. And that's when I decided perhaps I should try to help and support. But even in Flextronics, I could go into a room and I would maybe be the 1 female, 10 men. And, going into that environment young, it was natural for me to copy that behaviour. It was natural for me to be mentored by males, and I've had some fantastic, 2 in particular, very solid male mentors. But it was natural for me to adopt their behaviour until someone, a very strong, powerful female individual, said, don't mirror that behaviour. Find your own unique characteristics of what makes you special and play to those characteristics. And I think that's a lesson that we take into FLITE, is about using what comes natural to you as a female and bringing that into the business environment, because that's what's going to help diversify the workplace. If we just copy behaviour, whether that be because of our environment that we're within, then we're not going to open the doors to empower and change.
Thank you. And the next question we have is from a lady called Christina Montaigne, and she's a freelance communication trainer. How can we tap into our unique female qualities, and in brackets she said, we often don't know what they are, and bring them to the workplace in full trust that they that they are needed and they are meaningful?
I think it's a tough one to answer. I'll take a stab at it. But I think it's just kind of, I think it's a lot of things you learn over time. I don't think it's something, like you're saying, I don't think it's something you just know when you first start out, what are the skills that you're best at. It's like always we do these strength finders, we're always doing things to try and figure out what is it that we want to bring out. So I think it's just kind of maybe being aware of your situations, being aware of what's happening around you. Take note of the things when someone around you says, hey, you're really good at this, or you notice, hey, you stepped up in this situation, and that's something that, you bring to the table that's definitely unique, and trying to keep owning that. I think just making sure that you bring that to the table in the next situation. I don't think there's really a secret sauce to it.
She did kind of give her own answer to this question as well, which is, she said the easy way out is to copy what works in leadership, which is a male approach. She's quite an angry lady. This is how many women end up in pain and leaving the boards, because you can fake being someone else only for a little bit of time. So.
Well, and I think women tend to be a bit more collaborative versus competitive. And so I think that, especially in engineering, it's collaboration really gets you farther. You get those synergies where you get the best of each of the people in the team. For instance, you're not trying to compete within the team. You're not trying to compete with a different team. Maybe you find that you want to collaborate with another team and get to the solution in a better, faster way without having some kind of preconceived notion of what that answer might be, but to bring the best out of people. And I'm not sure that's, some women are better at that than others. I'm not even sure I'm that good at that, but I see sometimes competitiveness or more aggressiveness or snarkiness or something from some of the all-male groups that I've seen, and it doesn't seem that productive.
But then I think you can have the scenario where you've learnt behaviour, or it's your behaviour to act in an aggressive manner. And I think we had that example earlier with the presentation before this. The challenging group that you found herself within was actually when she had a female boss for the first time. Which is a really interesting scenario, and it's one that we really look at in FLITE, because people come to FLITE because they've maybe had some true life examples which have been painful to them. And it goes from the quite insignificant to taking minutes, making coffee, and it can be quite insignificant through to actually feeling really overpowered and really overshadowed. But actually, what confuses them is when they think they're going to go to a safe haven and work maybe for a female after having a bad experience, and then the female has a overpowering, domineering personality that they can't understand. It doesn't compute. So I don't think it is just a clean-cut statement that men, females don't cope in a male environment, and vice versa. I think it can be, we can struggle across the gender.
I think you're absolutely right. I had a very similar situation, and I had a female boss who didn't like working with other women, although she employed mostly women, and she really made all of our jobs quite difficult. There was a pressure, there was. She had a power trip the whole time, so it was very, very difficult to work with her, and she was incredibly vulnerable herself, and as it turned out, and she couldn't cope with it in the end and left, and she was just trying to prove herself too much, and pushed herself into a position which made the negativity and all the anxiety and everything that she had onto all the staff that she worked with. So.
It's interesting you bring up this issue about managers. So 22 years with IBM, 15 different managers, 11 females. So now, what have I learned from that? I had one where colleagues used to throw up before their meetings because they were so scared of her. She had this kind of China in the bull shop, China in the bull shop, bull in the China shop kind of mentality. And the irony was, I never had a problem with it because I was always prepared. But some of my peers who were women, that type of, they, I think, had this feeling that I was going in expecting somebody with a little bit more compassion and found somebody who was actually even more aggressive. And, you know, does that make it good or bad? I don't know. I think people join companies for the companies that they want to go work for, and they leave because of bad managers. And that's not gender specific, although, you know, one gender could accelerate that over another. I think what I learned from the large number of females that I've worked for, and again, I'm in a technical role, so it's interesting that a number of them didn't have technical backgrounds, but they offered kind of a variety, so this kind of, it helped me grow in my career to not always think technically. But the other thing is, I've really felt that they cared about my professional development. And so when you look at it through that vantage point, and that is some of the discussion that happened earlier with Allison about the importance of mentoring and having career planning, and taking those elements of it and helping drive employees and ensuring that women can grow in their career because they have the opportunity, I think was really, really important. So I've always been very grateful for those that you know, been able to help me in that way, and it just so happened in my case, most of them were women.
Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, so someone's going to say something. Sherry.
I just have a question. When you're done with this one.
Oh, okay. Anybody like to share an experience they've had on this topic before we move on to the next one?
Well, I just wanted to pick up on that theme and maybe ask the panelists to expand a little bit more on some of the things that both Gayle said and Ed said have me thinking of the difference between diversity and inclusion. So, like, the first step is to build the diversity, to actually have a diverse workforce or team or whatever. But how do you make that team thrive? And that's by focusing on inclusion so everyone can contribute. So just wondering if the panel has some additional examples of how to take that step from just a diverse group and really promoting an inclusive environment.
You know, I think that's a really good point. So, you know, diversity is inviting both genders to the dance. Inclusion is we're dancing together. And I think it's really important that we take and ensure that people are dancing on the dance floor, which means get them into projects, put them in positions to grow, establishing a model that allows for them to be in positions of leadership in that growth process, because those have such compounding effects. And so, I cited the example of the work that we were doing in the IoT space and the importance of purposely choosing the diverse group because we wanted a better, more complete outcome. And in the process of doing that, we saw people shine. That you would not, maybe you're being naive or discriminating unconsciously, that maybe you didn't expect that. And I'm just a big believer in that aspect. Give somebody the opportunity to shine, and they probably will.
Actually, back to your comment about unconscious bias.
Yeah.
I think most of the tech companies, they already went through the training of what is unconscious bias.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think it is a good reminder when you take the class and you read about it. But I noticed that people tend to forget, like 2-3 months after the class. How do you recommend to keep this diversity, inclusion, and constantly thinking of, hey, instead of finishing the project rather fast with the expert, I want to include this diverse candidate. I see that it happens all the time around me.
Yeah, I don't think, so I always struggle with annual education and awareness to perpetual practice. So, to get the check mark that says, we've had diversity training, or we've had, had training on becoming more aware of our unconscious biasness. It's interesting and important to at least start that, but I think the fallacy is that you're going to be able to improve just by, a single instance of that. I think it has to be an ongoing, perpetual program, and it has to be part of the culture. Yeah. So the culture becomes, if that's the trigger to start it into the culture, great. But I think it's incumbent upon everybody in the organization, man or woman, to ensure that it is more an accepted practice of the culture through that practice. That's my personal view.
Yeah, and I think as well what we have to accept and we have to establish is perhaps we have to go back a few steps. And it's wonderful that companies like IBM, companies like Intel are addressing this, and they're spending money, and they're making the teams more diverse, and they're purposely building teams that are bringing males and females together. But they're big companies, and some of that is a PR exercise, okay? So I think it goes back to actually we need to get into universities, we need to get into schools, we need to get into associations, and this needs to become the norm. Putting teams together with a purpose to almost see how they perform, as if it's a guinea pig scenario, is fine, because we're going to learn from that. And everything that we can learn and embrace and develop is great, but we need organisations that have that level of power to actually get into, which I know we are doing through STEM initiatives, to get into the schools, the colleges, so that this becomes the norm practice. It doesn't become yet another one initiative that a large organisation rolls out, because I work with the big tier ones, and the initiatives that those guys roll out, it makes my head spin. And this just kind of sometimes feels like, oh, let's put women on the table, let's put women on the agenda. No one takes that seriously, because it's yet another email. Because even how you run your initiatives are sometimes fundamentally wrong, because it's not, and it doesn't become part of the company culture. It becomes a bolt-on.
Sorry, Sherry, I haven't forgotten about you, but there's a couple of questions at the back, Kay. Yes, sir.
Okay, so now you're hitting closer to home here, so I'm just curious. What is it you want from the university? I mean, aside from giving your hand, could you...
Yeah, no, what we want is we want to be able to go into universities, and we want to empower young girls to go into science, technology, mathematics. We want to show them that a career in this profession is actually an exciting one. It's a career in innovation. It's not a career in manufacturing. Even if we go and we look at Shutterstock today and we look at photographs for a career in this type of industry, it's a very historical view. So we want to make sure that we bring it up to date, and we want to make it open for all. And I think once we see that coming up, the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, we may not even find ourselves in panels like this. We may not find there's a need for forums like this, where we have a separate topic to discuss how to integrate women into manufacturing. We may just have equilibrium. We may have an equal platform. So we just want to go out to the educational establishments and teach females and males that they don't have to be gender specific, and they don't have to take subjects that are gender specific.
So I don't want to be argumentative, I just want to understand if whatever, we're doing something wrong, we should fix it. But so when you're talking about it, we need to motivate more women to go into it, as opposed to, it's not like we're stopping them from coming in.
No, but they may not see it as a viable or an attractive offering because of the perception that it currently holds.
I think it's a bit of a re-education. It's the fact that it does look like a male. It looks like a male industry. If from the outside in, and very often when you go to lots of different meetings, it's very male dominated. So it is re-educating, I think.
Yeah, and something like really practical. I mean, just for me, like I guess one example is just providing those type of role models in the space. I mean, I think something really easy to do is from Portland State is where I went to college, and so I go back to Portland State when they do their capstone projects and talk about what are some things you can do during your capstone projects to kind of help pull the team together. And it was interesting for me. I guess one example was when I went and talked to them. They were saying. They're talking about, oh, well, this one guy is not pulling his weight. They're working a team of 4 projects, and they're kind of struggling with how to do that. And the advice I gave to them is that, this is real life. This is what it's like when you're in the workplace. Like, you don't go into, an engineering job and sit at your computer all day by yourself and don't talk to people. The reality of the workforce is you also have to be able to work with people that are different from you, that don't think the same way as you, that maybe don't all pull the same weight in a program. And so I think, maybe that's maybe a little bit more of a simplistic approach, but it was just like, hey, being able to show some role models, some representative people from different industries. I will say I didn't know that you could be an engineer at Nike, before I became an engineer at Nike. I think it's also just being able to show some different types of people as role models and examples in schools to give people a different perspective of what they could do.
The lady over there, sorry, did you still have a question? Another one, okay. There's a gentleman at the back, I think.
So, your question, I want to answer something to your question. You said they have not, you posed a question saying that they have not been stopped. It's a question. Actually, in one sense, it's happening. The gender stereotyping has gotten to a point where by the time a girl gets to be a teenager, she's turned off from the STEM program for quite a bit. So if you're doing that, if you're gender stereotyping, that is one passive way of stopping them. You don't have to aggressively say you cannot become an engineer, but if you don't motivate them and you perpetuate those stereotypes, it will automatically end up happening. So this is a counterbalance to that argument. How do you make it happen? You actually have to actively promote. Unfortunate situation is that on equal footing, you don't need to do anything. It goes on automatic pilot. But it's gotten to a point where you need to have this. That's why we have panels like this. Hopefully what one of the speakers said, in another generation, we probably don't have to have this. For that, we need to go forward to do it. They're laughing. It's not going to be enough.
I think we're on the same side. All I'm thinking is, it's too late by the time they college. We're not stopping them, but we
You're right.
do it. You gotta get them in high
Grade
school.
school.
Yeah, it's
Really,
true,
it's
yeah.
grade school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can't do it. It's too late. By the time we have an influence, we're already looking at the selective form. You gotta hit them in high school and in grade school.
There are some studies by the American Association of University Women, joint sponsored with the Society of Women Engineers, looking at some of the practices in various engineering colleges around the U.S. at least. I don't know if they've looked outside. And they have identified, I can't talk to the details, I can refer you to the report. They've identified some best practices, and I think it's Harvey Mudd that has really made great strides in increasing the percentage of women graduates through looking at some best practices. So there are some reference materials for organizations, for colleges to make some improvements.
So the analogy I would give is basically standing by and doing nothing is equivalent to promoting. That's what is happening exactly. So everybody has to activate this part. I have a daughter, and right from day one, she's not an engineer, but she went into marketing, and I told her whatever she wants to do. She told me I'm not going to be an engineer. That's fine, but you have to actively do that. And I had to check myself time to time, because the bias is there as we grow up and whatever it is coming from a different culture. So I had to check myself as it was. Even now, I still do it. But
Thank you.
Actually, I have something to add. I think it is definitely essential to educate girls and to make sure they know they can go anywhere they want. They can pursue whatever goal. But reality is, when they graduate, if you look at all these Fortune 500 companies, is the ratio of women to men is always decreases when it gets closer to the top. And even we educate them. If somebody does a quick research, they say, well, it seems like there is no path for me if I feel successful to become a CEO. Or I don't know how can we change that. That is, I agree with you, education is the most important thing, but getting to the top is really hard. At Intel, they did a study, the grade level, you go higher grade level, the number of the diverse candidates, female including, is getting less and less. And it reminds me of Iran, that we have more educated women with the higher degrees, like 57% women compared to 47 men. But none of them, they're in the workforce.
Okay. Okay, Sherry, would you like to go first? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So this is actually coming right off of what anyone was just talking about. I agree that we need to educate girls from toddlerhood, but I'm not willing to wait another few generations to like let this get good for, dead men. I need something now. So, and we do know that in technical roles especially, women are tracking men and then they're no longer tracking men. We know statistically we're in a significant minority within the technical realm. So we can't do it alone. We're not going to be able to make this change within the technical world just by women talking to women. So my question to the panel is, do you have any suggestions for how we can promote and support men as allies and help them to understand what they need to do to bring everybody else up where they are?
And this is very similar to a question that we have here as well about mentorship and, and finding good mentors. And
I'm not really talking about mentorship.
okay.
I mean, if you want to call it something, you might be calling it sponsorship. But I'm really talking about male allies.
Okay.
I think part of the challenge is to help. I'm going to turn it around a little bit and then come back. There are derailment factors that contribute in a woman's professional development that cause as traps, that cause that curve to make the angle that it does. Some of them are internal bias. Like I have a number of managers. A number of them were in technical professional roles that could have stayed in technical professional roles and then became a manager. It was disproportionate in that number. Understanding what those are, that in order to grow in your career, to break the glass, I think to your point, is that you can continue to stay in a technical role and still grow in your career as a woman without having to feel the need that I'm going to go to a manager job or to a human resource job. I think that's incredibly important to educate not only the women, but the men that are looking to be or are the mentors for them to say, well, there's really no path for you. I think it's very important to be able to do that. We're a large company. We have other programs that are in place to help encourage the professional development and growth of females in technical professions. But I think understanding the derailment factors within the institution are really, really important, because that's the cultural bias that exists within that institution, that if once you can identify those things, you're in a better position to start breaking them. Because I agree with you. We've seen them, and even in IBM, the fall off as they go through their pay grades is horrible. And we've tried to institute programs for mentoring, for advising, educating first-line managers, encouraging them to stay in these professional roles, getting them back into the workforce after they've decided, there's this, we culturally expect the woman to take care of the kids, but it doesn't have to be that way. And maybe that's part of the challenge here, is to say, well, you have a biological aspect, but once that's over, there's no reason why the husband shouldn't be able to stay at home and you go to work right after you're ready to come back. I think all of those things are important for us to change culturally, because otherwise I don't know that we change those numbers, not in the next generation, in the next 100 years, if we don't change those aspects of that bias. I just don't see it possible.
The report that Marie referenced, AAUW, does talk about the leaky pipe, and how that degrades over time. So certainly you have to fill the pipe with full 50%, which we don't see in the engineering schools, right? We don't see 50% women typically, and that's like the first problem. I do a lot of work trying to get girls interested in engineering from an early age, like 7th and 8th grade. We do an Expanding Your Horizons conference, kind of to have women as role models, doing some kind of hands-on activity for careers to try to help fill the pipe from the start. And we do a Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day, and so those things help. Maybe somebody said once it turned the ship for them to want to go into engineering. So you get more to start with, but we aren't even getting there, right? We're not even getting there to 50%. But that report from the AUW talked about the different reasons why you get the leaky pipe and where women leave the technical fields. I fully believe in men being full partners at home. I believe totally in paternity leave as being the best way to get women back into the workforce fully after they've had a kid. So, hopefully we can encourage more of those kinds of things. But your question about men as allies, if we can make the profession more attractive, by knowing that, you are treated as equal, you're treated as professional, you're treated with respect at work. I think it's way better than like when I started in the engineering field. It's way better than it used to be, but it could still be even better. And but how can we make it so that there's a craving for women to enter this field, for girls to enter this field, and for women to stay in it? I think having men who will say, well, Julie will answer that question because she's our expert in that, making sure that there's a really point made about that. So I think just that awareness of when you see everyone in the room looking at the guy for the answer, or the guy who's doing all the talking, or whatever it is, to make sure that the women are pointed out as, she's the one who answers this question, and we want to hear from her on this one, so that there's not that overriding dominance of I don't know, what the mansplaining thing is.
And I think, again, whilst we're talking about getting in young, I think whilst we want to split the young girls out, I think we also need to make sure we do a good job of collaborating at that early age as well. So there isn't a stream for young girls and a stream for young boys that they naturally progress down. And I do take your point, we want it to happen now, but small steps, and then, we will get there. But I do think it comes down to actually young boys, young girls seeing that together, collaboration, that both forces joining can actually be more powerful, more dynamic. But someone touched on unconscious bias earlier, I think it was yourself, and we've all, as you say, we've been on the training, and sometimes, and I think we spoke about this last year, sometimes it's just about being the female that puts your hand up to your male superior or your male colleague to say, this is happening to me. And just making that person aware that this is happening allows them to do something about it. And sometimes, we just, our character is to accept the behaviour and think, well, tomorrow's another day, I'll handle it tomorrow, or leave that job and go elsewhere. And I think we need to take away a life lesson that actually if we try to speak up and we let our colleagues know that we're experiencing negative forces, that we feel that we're experiencing, sometimes they don't even notice, sometimes they do not know what's going on, but the next time it happens in the meeting environment where they can see you're expected, because you're the female in the room, to take the note, they can do something about it, they can address it, and they can shut it down, and they can say, well, Gayle's not taking the notes today, she had her turn last week, how about you take the notes this week, Mark, So it is a long road, and, it's not going to be fixed tomorrow, but I think there are organisations doing wonderful jobs based on collaboration and taking a collaborative approach rather than a STEM for females and a STEM for males.
It is becoming more significant for sure, and it has, it's much more commonplace now for this kind of discussion to be happening, so people are recognising it. Sorry.
I was just going to make a comment. I actually have 2 young children, and our school district actually started the STEM program with them in 4th grade. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of focus being put on having equality from a young age, and they're being exposed to that. The other comment that I would make is that it's not just a workplace happens. I happen to be in a position where my husband and I have reverse roles. Today my son is home sick from school, and my husband is the one that's taking off that time. I spend a lot of my time traveling, and that is a reverse role in a lot of
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to add one thing. I think when you're talking about, how do we do something now, I think the first thought for me was that the most successful male allies I've always had have been my managers, because it was kind of like more intuitive role, right? They have a pretty strong ability to affect positively or negatively how you progress, and how your perception is for those around you. So I think that, like we've talked about, positive managers regardless of the gender, but I feel like that's probably one of the places that we can invest the most is in, I think rewarding the great managers and holding the ones that aren't so great accountable. I think that's probably one of the places I could see it really progressing a lot faster for right now, versus like a lot of program stuff. This is just, I was just seeing a lot of situations where, some managers are, just really lousy managers. And in those cases, it's like, it's pretty obvious why the people under them aren't thriving, right? So I think that's one thing we could do right now.
But yeah, and I think we are getting there, because what I'm seeing in the organisations I get to, well-being's on the agenda, and your actual physical, mental well-being within your workplace, and not having gender parity is something that can lead to a very negative state of well-being. So there is definitely more focus on making sure that those managers are promoted, that their team thrives. And the key reason their team thrives is because they can all work together, they can all collaborate, and there's a consensus of well-being. There aren't people taking time off sick, there aren't people, doing, as you said, under your female leadership. So there's lots of small movements, I think, happening that will contribute to the bigger picture.
Thank you. Sherry, you've been very patient.
First, let me say that I spent the first 10, 15 years of my career in a very female-dominated industry. I was in the travel industry for 15, 20 years, and then came into the manufacturing, electronics, very high-tech industry, and it was quite a shock. And this organization allowed me to see women in very technical and powerful and roles that you just go, wow. I say wow all the time. The first time I met Dr. Laura, I don't know if anybody knows her, but you've been around any amount of time, you've met Dr. Laura. The first time I met her and had a conversation with her, I was floored. But now, my question. If you could give one piece of advice to a young person coming into this industry, and I'd like to make it industry specific. Julie, I know you're now designing shoes, and we love you for that, because I'm a big fan of Nike shoes. Because of the bias towards men, of it being totally male-dominated, what was the one piece of advice you would give to that person coming in to help them on their journey?
Well, I guess when I did come straight out of college, I went straight into Intel. So I'll say I think it's just being confident, I think, would be the one piece of advice I would say. I think a lot of times we sell ourselves short, and I think that's just, coming in there and being confident in what you bring to the table.